All right. Hello there, and welcome to today's event, Tackling Technical Debt, Where to Start, and most importantly, how to proceed. I'm Dustin Heisler, Chief Innovation Officer for Government Technology Magazine, and I'm excited to serve as your host for today's event. And just want to say thanks for joining us. We're in for a great session over the next 30 minutes. Now, before we dive into the meat of our conversation today, a few brief housekeeping notes. Number one, a recording of this presentation will be emailed to all registrants within 48 hours. You can use this recording for your reference or feel free to pass it along to your colleagues. We've also designed this webcast to be interactive, so make sure you participate in Q&A with us by asking questions using that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can also use the chat feature. We'll be monitoring that as well, and we'll answer as many of them as possible as we get to the tail end of our time together today. Now let's talk a little bit about who's joining us. Joining me today will be Sean McSpadden, Senior Fellow with the Center for Digital Government, and Amber Deottavio, Vice President of Product Management for Excella. Sean is an executive level information technology professional with over 30 years experience in the private, nonprofit, and public sectors. From June 2008 to September 2013, he served as the state of Oregon's Deputy State Chief Information Officer. Amber's a seasoned executive with over 20 years experience in nonprofit tech, civic tech, and gov tech. And for the last decade, she has been driving product strategy for various Excella products and solutions, including the Civic platform, citizen access, mobile, and civic applications. We're going to have a great discussion and fireside chat with both of our speakers today, but I wanted to kind of set the stage with a little bit as to why this is such a critical topic. And we'll start with just what we're seeing in the market. Right now, GovTech as an industry is having what we call an app store moment. You've got changing expectations, a new wave of thinkers that are coming in, cloud that's unlocked so many new use cases, available funding to help fund these modernization projects, loosening procurement rules and regulations, existing company maturity. You've got entrepreneurs and a lot of innovation that's happening and new capital to kind of fund some of the innovations that we're seeing in the market. Now, government is responding to this unique moment in time by procuring and delivering technology as a service, but they're really looking now at modernizing these underlying systems and processes. So many of you that are listening in right now, you may be thinking about how to overcome your technical debt challenge and modernize those systems. We're going to talk about that today. Hybrid work is definitely still top of mind, but building kind of a foundation for the future, for compliance, for privacy, for low code and no code is really another area of focus that kind of goes back to that back office modernization piece of things. We've also seen a greater focus on social justice initiatives, digital equity, digital divide and inclusion. And CIOs are evolving to this moment to become brokers of applications and responding with security and speed as an expectation. So there's a lot of kind of colliding forces that are giving rise to this app store moment that's impacting this wider market as a whole, but it's so exciting to see what's happening in government. Now, I want to kind of dive into what it means kind of as we look in the trenches of tackling technical debt and invite Amber to come to the stage as we kind of dive into what she's seen in the market, and then we'll follow that fireside chat with Sean. Amber, thanks so much for carving some time out to join us today.
Thanks for having me.
So super excited to kind of get your perspectives on what you're seeing in the market. Let's just start first with what are you hearing in the trenches as it relates to technical debt?
Well, I talk to IT folks and IT leaders all the time, and technical debt is really a huge issue. And frankly, it's keeping many of them up at night. It's a burden and it's pretty significant. Obviously, every organization has technical debt, but in the public sector, it's impacted, I think, more significantly due to things like budget cuts and resource shortages and putting off addressing those legacy systems for really far too long, where now it's just piling up and it's overwhelming and really puts the agency at risk for things like security vulnerabilities. A lot of them are concerned about the costs associated with like the effort and the resources and time to maintain or fix or patch something. If something terribly goes wrong tomorrow, are we able to get the system back up and running because the person who built it's no longer here or they're about to retire next year? So, really, I think the biggest concern is that how do they continue providing these critical public services? And then I think the other big concern that I hear is that the technical debt is really slowing down their ability to modernize and to innovate. Recently, I met with a group of CIOs that told me that they're spending like 60-70% of their IT budget just on maintaining and patching hundreds of legacy systems, and that they're really just struggling to figure out how to reduce the technical debt faster than they are today so that they can focus on those modernization and innovation efforts.
Yeah, that's a great overview. And I think you're exactly right. And it's been interesting to see the federal funding flowing and how agencies kind of have this once in a generation opportunity to really reimagine whether they invest in the previous ways of doing things or they double down on modernizing those systems and kind of addressing those technical debt problems. Now, who are you seeing doing back-end modernization in the best way, and any elements that you can kind of extract that agencies can leverage as a part of their strategy?
Well, I mean, when you think of technical debt accruing, it's actually very similar to financial debt. So, you know, but addressing the technical debt in like those big portions, similar to what you would think about, you know, paying off a credit card or something like that, once you have the means to do so, is not necessarily the best approach. What we're seeing from those agencies that are really taking this and getting their arms around it is really identifying as a first step, identifying what technical debt they have today. So inventorying their entire systems. And through this process, identifying things like, you know, the cost, the resources needed to support and maintain, the age and the risk of things like hardware breaking, things like that. So essentially giving the technical debt like a credit score that's going to help them assess the urgency and the risk, so that they can really see it for what it is. One agency that I've worked with recently does this extremely well. It's Chesterfield County, Virginia. They know exactly how much technical debt they have, and they allocate funds for each year to address those with the highest urgency. I mean, they really basically have a roadmap out for the next several years. And what we're seeing is the agencies like them that do this and they keep track of their technical debt and they ensure that it doesn't get out of control in the future are able to pay that down more quickly and really stay on top of it.
Yeah, I love that analogy. It's such a great way to describe kind of that technical debt problem and thinking about the credit score implications of it. So now looking at kind of the enterprise approach has become an area of focus for a lot of CIOs. You know, we kind of call this period of time the Great Reconciliation, where CIOs are grappling with everything that was deployed in response to the pandemic and trying to fit everything into an enterprise box. How does modernizing the backend system fit into this overarching kind of enterprise platform strategy that CIOs are focused on today?
Well, if you take a step back and you look at some of the primary causes of technical debt, most of them are due to complexity, lack of documentation, and then basically disparate and siloed systems that do lots of different things and they're built in various languages. In the software world, you know, as a product leader, if I were to be challenged with this type of technical debt and modernization, I would look for redundancies. And where possible, I would consolidate and focus on one product, one common language to support as many use cases as possible. It's really extremely costly to have so many skill sets required to keep the lights on, essentially. So that same strategy, I think, could be applied to government technology modernization, and many IT leaders are heading this direction. So they're really looking for, you know, basically reducing down to a handful of platforms and shared databases that reduces that skill set that's required to maintain these systems. And then by doing that, it really plays into their, you know, their enterprise platform strategy. It makes communication far easier, especially when they're working across the department lines. And it's going to get the organization easy access to accurate and real-time data that's really going to help them understand their current operations and where they should invest in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because when you think about, you know, modernizing the back end, right, you don't always think about the analytics and data that can be extrapolated from that. And everyone wants to do, you know, that level of work, but they've got to have the right foundation. And so addressing that technical debt, you know, as you mentioned, can allow you to do, you know, all the things that you want to do from a data and operationalizing data perspective. So I love that. Now, how is Acela helping agencies navigate these technical debt challenges, and why is that partner approach more effective than agencies trying to go at this alone?
Well, we definitely don't want agencies to go at this alone. I mean, they have a really important job. So there's a couple of things that you get when you work with industry leading software vendors. The first is you're getting a slew of expertise and domain knowledge in the industry. You know, companies like Acela work with hundreds and thousands of different cities, counties, and states. And so they really know what works and what doesn't work. And they can provide, you know, solutions and guidance on the direction that will help you as an organization be successful. Also, you get the expertise in the technology and what they offer. If you have a modernization list, let's say a list of tech debt or modernization efforts that you need to tackle over the next several years, I would recommend calling on your partners to help you understand what they can help you with. This is something that Excel offers as well, and really help understand what the possibilities are. You may not know what they are, and they can really help you with those so that you can evaluate, the best fit. And then really, in SaaS, you're handing over a lot of that technical responsibility and that technical debt responsibility over to that partner. And so understanding what those cost savings are and what those benefits are, I think are important.
Yeah, I love your line, understand the possibilities. And I think that's a good starting point for agencies. You don't know what you don't know. So that's where, I personally, as a CIO in the past, have had great experience with private sector partners that have helped me explore what's possible when I get out of the trenches. So now let's talk about kind of the elephant in the room, and that's funding, right? So when we think about, dealing with technical debt, funding plays such a critical role in overcoming some of those legacy technology investments. How should agencies look at funding their modernization efforts today?
Well, we see there's lots of different ideas and ways to go about this. I talked a little earlier about really understanding the current state of things and planning out for the future. And this can be done in a couple of ways. One, you could put together your business cases so that you can plan to get that funding and that budget, years in advance. Others have started to apply technology fees. And this is something you can plan ahead when you implement a new solution. And these technology fees are used to pay for or fund the maintenance and the support and things like that for the future, so that you don't get in a situation where, we didn't make the cut for budget this year, continue to build up that technical debt over time. So this really helps you have the funding when you need it at the right time. And then another thing to consider, it's not quite as popular, but we do see significant cost savings, so that you can take those cost savings and then apply that versus go out for additional budget. And it's really looking at shared services. Look within your current department. Are there other systems or services that are available that do something similar that I can take advantage of by just, maybe you could take advantage of it with no additional cost, or maybe you just add a few more users to that system and be able to, get those cost savings immediately. One of our customers actually does a really great job at this. Several years ago, the state of Oregon looked at their permitting processes, and they found, they standardized actually on permits from city to city to county, and were able to set up a system that any of the local jurisdictions could take advantage of. And this really, especially for the smaller organizations that don't have as large of a budget, we're able to take advantage of this and be able to modernize and provide, the online services that they wanted to at a very little cost. So I think, looking for those types of things, like being creative, looking outside the box, there are definitely different ways that you could find the funding to support these efforts.
Yeah, those are great strategies. Well, Amber, thanks so much for carving some time out. We'll have some time for questions for Amber. So if you've got questions, make sure you submit those through the Q&A function of the chat. We'll tackle as many of those at the end of our time today. So thank you for joining us, Amber. All right, I want to bring Sean in now as we talk about, from Sean's perspective, what's going on in the trenches of agencies. So Sean, thanks so much for carving some time out to join us today.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Amber. It's always difficult on these kinds of webinars to go second. Amber really hit the nail on the head in a variety of areas, and I appreciate the reference to Oregon, the good things that Oregon agencies have been doing. Some of the challenges that we're seeing with agencies, Amber mentioned how critical it is to understand your current state. And believe it or not, it's sad to say, one of the most foundational challenges that our agencies have is collecting and maintaining a current and complete inventory of their systems. it begs the question, how can you manage, support, and secure, much less modernize or replace systems that you can't even count? So it is just absolutely essential for agencies to get their their hands around this, their arms around that issue, and keep that inventory current over time. I think second, it's important to note, and Amber mentioned a few of these complexities in regard to technical debt. Technical debt is not just one thing. It's not just aging hardware and software, unsupported systems. It does involve, the old people, processes, and technology. You really have to keep in mind, your current employee base, who's eligible for retirement, what systems they were responsible for developing 30 plus years ago, and the same people are just about to walk out the door, and they're the only ones who understand how those custom developed systems really work. So that's critical to understand, again, the technology, the people, processes. Some of these business processes were developed again decades ago. They may no longer fit the needs of the agency or their customers, and you really need to delve into those absolutely essential processes that keep your operation running and provide good customer service. The new ones you need to put in place and automate in the future. But you've got to be willing to do what you can to get rid of some of those non-value added processes, because you don't want to pave a cow path in the future. What that means, because technical debt comes in many forms, is that a one-size-fits-all solution or approach to modernizing your systems, eliminating technical debt, really doesn't work. And so you've got to work with your business and IT leaders to choose targeted, thoughtful, and nuanced approaches to really deal with this issue effectively. Third, I've worked 23 years in Oregon state government in the executive branch and then in the legislative branch. And, certainly it's apparent to me that organizational structure matters. 50 plus states, 6 territories, they all organize their IT operations differently. Oregon is largely a decentralized state. We do have a state CIO with about 300 staff. However, we have about 1,700 information technology professionals and literally thousands of applications that are the responsibility of our state agencies. So when you have to deal with that kind of independence and autonomy and systems that have been developed over time, over decades, to fit the individual needs of an agency, not the agencies within a program area, not the enterprise writ large. There's some real complexities in trying to devise effective strategies to modernize a state enterprise set of systems. Let's see what else I would want to say about that. Yeah, I think that hits the kind of the key points that we've been dealing with. Again, not only will those organizational challenges affect what modernization approach ultimately is chosen, it'll also affect the funding that's available ultimately, and the support that the legislature and the executive branch can gain to replace these systems.
I think those are great points, and no silver bullet to doing the work, but I think your people, process, technology, kind of explanation definitely fits this, right? Because we're one to lean into the tech, which is part of this, but we also need to think about the other elements of this piece. Now, speaking of tech, one of the things that we've been hearing is software as a service is kind of revolutionizing the way that we procure and kind of deploy IT. But why is this not the only solution to this growing back-end challenge? It doesn't just mean replacing the front end with a managed service. Tell me a little bit about your views on that.
Well, I think it kind of starts with, if you've seen one state, or if you've seen one state agency across the 50 states, you've seen one state or one state agency. We all have our own unique requirements that have been custom developed or custom coded in our legacy systems over time. And certainly software as a service that has a set of common functions that provides kind of that 80%, what's a normalcy to state agencies across the country is incredibly valuable. It provides really an unprecedented opportunity to modernize quickly, to choose configuration rather than custom development, if possible. But again, there may be circumstances where the unique characteristics or needs or requirements of a state agency or of a state really don't allow a one-for-one replacement. Mm-hmm. So, agencies really need to be thinking about a whole variety of options. In the right circumstances, you could choose to rehost or replatform the application. In other situations, refactoring the code or re-architecting the application might be the appropriate course of action. All factors considered, you could choose to rebuild the application. Again, have either your own staff or a vendor custom develop a new system to replace the old, or you could move to a software as a service solution. Again, you've got to think about and again be thoughtful and nuanced about the approach that's chosen. One note of caution that I would throw out there, and I kind of alluded to that 80-20 rule that you often have to deal with, is that even if a software as a service solution is chosen, it likely won't always replace 100% of the automated functionality of the legacy system. And so the agencies really have to make those hard choices about re-engineering processes, eliminating processes, or swallowing the hard pill, deploying the new system, and then be left with having to maintain and support the balance of that legacy system, for some time, and that just extends the pain and the impacts of technical debt farther into the future.
Yeah, I think those are great points, and kind of reminded me of what Amber said when it came to looking at the industry to help explore those possibilities. So as you think about those different approaches that are there, finding a way to navigate and to find the right model to accomplish the business objectives that you have. So when it comes to kind of developing and prioritizing a roadmap to guide modernization, where should agencies start that process? Any words of advice for them?
Well, for most, it's probably not what you originally would think about, but you really got to get yourself organized, and you've got to understand what kind of business and IT involvement the leadership within your agency or your program area or your state, you've got to identify the right mix of folks who can govern the initiative, who have the right kinds of decision-making powers, the right kinds of resources, honestly, the experience and knowledge of the business operations, of the state involved. They've got to be involved up front so that you understand who's going to guide, lead, and direct the initiative over time. I think the next step would be for agencies to spend time developing at least a high-level strategy that's iteratively developed and expanded over time. You've got to have that high-level guide that begins to delve into the methods and criteria you're going to use to prioritize your modernization efforts. As I mentioned, in a state government, we have thousands of applications. So if you were to just simply start from A to Z and do a full comprehensive inventory, you'll probably get that inventory at some point in the future, but it may not be the most effective use of your time. Being able to categorize your inventory efforts, your analysis efforts, and your modernization efforts on those highest value systems, those highest, most mission critical systems, may be a better way to approach this issue. Again, iterating that development of an inventory over time. I think here it's important that business and IT leaders in an organization, that they come to the agreement on the same mindset and focus. In regard to mindset, what I have in mind there is do you as an organization view modernization or the elimination of technical debt as a big bang activity? as something you do episodically when there's a crisis, something that you only do every 10 to 15 years? Or as Amber indicated, do you, put this on an assembly line? Do you treat it more like a continuous activity? Are you going to develop not only the governance, the strategies, and the funding approaches to be able to execute that continuous level of improvement or modernization? Or again, are you going to only approach this, in that big bang methodology? Kind of the analogy I'm thinking of is it's kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. When those workers are done painting the full bridge, it's time to start over again. And so you really got to think of it in that way, because these technology systems are not going to last forever. They're not going to support the business needs forever. And you really need to take that more continuous improvement, continuous modernization mindset. I think the other, and I alluded to this a little bit in terms of inventory, is the focus of the organization. Decisions have to be made. Are you going to really go after first only those oldest, hardest to maintain and support, least secure systems? In some cases, you probably need to, because of the kind of data that's processed through them, or the core business functions they support. But an alternative approach would be, again, to identify those agency mission critical systems or statewide mission critical systems, and focus on modernizing those systems first. So you really have to be careful about how you approach this issue of eliminating technical debt. And again, mindset and focus really matters.
Yeah, great words of advice. On our remaining few minutes, I want to bring Amber back in and tackle some questions that we have here. So Amber, welcome back. First question, actually, to kind of get you both to weigh in on is, how do you build internal support and investment across different stakeholders? And Sean, maybe we'll start with you here and, kind of get your perspective for people outside of IT. How do you get them to justify the investment necessary for that continuous innovation you were just talking about?
Well, again, if you're going to approach this on an individual level, you have one set of factors you've got to consider. But within state government, really it comes down to program area governance. You've got to make sure that the right leaders, business and IT, across those multiple agencies are involved. I think another, and Amber alluded to this, you've got to really be thinking about innovative funding strategies, in particular when you're going after cloud solutions. And you're trying to ensure that you have online applications where, in some cases, where licensing agencies and permitting agencies are concerned, you're dealing with payments, online payments. There are a whole bunch of opportunities to explore public-private partnerships, to explore what vendor-funded system implementations that ultimately are paid for through convenience fees or transaction fees. Any number of strategies, in addition to kind of the age-old, I have a major system, it's going to cost tens of millions of dollars, I'm going to use bond funding to acquire a system, then maintain it, support it either internally or through a vendor over time. So those are the two things I would mention. Again, governance, and get out of the box in terms of how you're going to fund these systems over time. It will improve your chances if you're not, if you don't always fall back on that traditional funding approach.
Great words of advice. Amber, what do you think about kind of getting the internal support and investment necessary? Any words of advice on how agencies can start that process?
Yeah, well, and they need to sell it. They need to put together a business case. They need to explain what the value is going to bring. If an engineer came to me today and said, hey, I need to re-architect this code, or we need to completely refactor this, or rip and replace something, and I don't get anything in return, like for my customers, I'm going to say, why? Like, it's not broken, it works fine. But I may not understand what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe it's being held together with duct tape and baling wire and it could break any day, or maybe there's a security vulnerability that I'm unaware of. So I think really helping them understand what the risks are of not doing it, and what the benefits will be if they do it. And so making sure that they understand that. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to get pushback, and it's going to create more work for you in the long run.
Yeah, great words of advice to you both. Well, it's hard to believe that we are officially at time, and I do want to be respectful of our time commitments, so we'll have to begin our wrap up here. In closing, thank you, Sean and Amber, for carving some time out to join us and share all of your insights about this incredibly important topic. I know I learned a few things, and I know our audience did as well, so really appreciate that. And a special thank you to our partners at Acela for enabling us to bring this discussion to our audience. And thanks to our audience for spending the last 30 minutes with us. We look forward to seeing you again at another government technology event. We hope you have a great rest of your day and week ahead.